Awesome. But again, welcome to the second session of your DM150, and we are going to be continuing with our content strategy slides and discussing essentially what we will be doing more with our content management. And with these first two chapters and slides, you should be in pretty good shape in order to work on your capstone projects and stuff like that. Today, we just wanted to kind of explore how you can creatively think about your content strategy and figuring out the channels that you use for content marketing. If you remember yesterday, we talked a bit about how you don't need to be on every social media platform. And that's fine to say, but then you can also ask, well, how do I figure out which one to be on, right? So in today's lesson, we're just going to be discussing how we can figure that out. And a key component of figuring out your social media channels that you're going to use is also understanding what information, or excuse me, what makes people share your information. So, does a Facebook group make your information share better, or is it more so Twitter posting and stuff as well? So, these are all things that you should think about. And we're also going to be identifying the tone, so how we want to brand ourselves essentially, and understanding that each one is not necessarily than the other when it comes to branding strategies. A very long message and explaining your core values and tenets could be good, and also a very short one with a very specific message could be good as well. So again, in today's lessons, we're just going to try to figure out what channels to use and how you want to present yourself in those channels. Awesome. So the question here, in general, is: would you give away your intellectual property? And essentially, that is what content management will be about. And as it says here, it seems to be against what we usually think. If we have an intellectual property that we own or anything like that, or that we rely on, it seems a bit absurd to just start giving it away for free, especially. But essentially, that is what we are trying to do with our web content. We are trying to provide everything we know about ourselves for free to other people. Let's see here. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anyone in the waiting room. Awesome. Cool. And again, everyone, I'm recording this, so you can go ahead and rewatch this or anything at your own leisure. Cool. And excuse me. Cool. So our content marketing is all about our sharing of our, we said earlier, our intellectual property, but essentially of what our content and sorry, essentially what our content and brand is about. And again, you want to, this third bullet point is reiterating what we already know, but we want to reach as many people as possible. But at the same time, we want to also make sure that we're really hitting the nail on the head for the customers that we pick, right? If you remember from yesterday, we said that you kind of want to determine your customer type. Some of them are, we said dog walkers in the Chicago area. Some of them might be landowners or anything as well. So you want to make sure that you reach all of them as possible, but you're still containing that niche customer. Cool. And another important thing is that we said this earlier too, but if you're wearing Nike, or as a few folks said, they wear the club uniforms from soccer, you're kind of advertising those clubs and those brands yourself without, you might not be paid to do it, and you might not be knowing it, you're doing it all the time, but you're essentially sharing and advertising for them. So you want to make sure that the content, who you share it with, also share it. Cool. So here is just a small example, excuse me, of different ways that we can figure out how to package our information or share our information and content using different mediums. So for example, you can have an article on your website. If you have a personal website, those are very helpful. And you can also put that same article maybe on a tweet or on a Facebook post. So a lot of these can be shifted around to these different social media platforms. But I think it's good that your brand and your consistency and your values that we talked about as well will be pretty similar on each of those websites, except the way that we deliver the content on those might be a bit different. For example, if you're trying to write a tweet, I'm not sure what the limit is or anything, but it's probably not going to be as in depth as an article on a website. And it's going to look differently too. So you want to make sure that while you're still maintaining your similar brand, you're kind of conforming to the requirements of each of these different mediums. So some tweets are a lot smaller and shorter, and you would need to account for that if you have an article on your website that you want to talk about. Cool. And again, on this one here, you just want to make sure that your customer feels safe accepting your product. And we're trying to figure out how we can share our information in a creative fashion. So here's always a good idea. I mean, you're probably usually told this if you're not allowed to eat a lot of food or anything like that too. But there's an age-old adage of less is more, right? Excuse me. So inside this video here, with this question as well, I mentioned this earlier. I might put together that discussion board for this. There's a nice video here, but we just want to make sure, or just to reiterate too, this Michelin company had the idea to start up these very expensive and rigorously defined rule sets for restaurants in order to get people to drive more so that they could sell more tires. And again, let's see here. Again, that just relates to our idea is that sometimes it's good with your brand and your company to explore new areas, and other times it might backfire too. But sometimes it's good to explore these other avenues. But again, if you look here for our content strategy, let's see here. That will just be the way that we go ahead and deliver our content marketing to. Cool. So I want to make sure. I don't know why. Okay. Sorry, my slides sometimes get mixed up here. Now, we talked a bit about our content strategy before as well, but a content strategy, again, reiterates the idea of how you're going to approach sharing your intellectual property or your your company's information with other people. And here are a few ideas. Let's see here. Here are a few bullet points I would say that are for effective content strategy. And the three of these kind of flow into each other. And the first one starts slowly. I would say that you can't really determine that sometimes because you might start something and it blows up all of a sudden. I do know a few like YouTube channels start off with nothing, and then if they do something in particular, they might blow up the next day. But essentially, the key that you want to have here is consistency. Because if you're consistent with your content marketing and your strategy, as you can see here, something that builds over time and follows a schedule, you'll be able to attract more individuals to your brand, and you'll be able to show off the values that you're consistent with your work and that you're constantly updating it too, right? So I would say consistency is key if you want to have an effective content strategy, and make a schedule for yourself too. If you're very busy and you can only do stuff once a week, make sure that you do it once a week and do it very well. If you have more time, maybe do content marketing or strategies 3 to 4 times a week. So these are all just ideas you could have, but I would say get a schedule down and stick to it, and you should be good to go with your content marketing. Cool. And now I think this one is kind of just implied too. But again, if you're not familiar with all these strategies or content, you can always hire someone as well to help you out too. There's a lot of people in it too. But the hope of this class with our projects as well is that you guys can become the experts on these contents. Cool. Now, here's a small just example of areas of marketing channels that might be familiar with you. Websites are always obvious. Blogs are helpful too. But there's a bunch of cool things over here as well, like podcasts and webinars and other events that you can have your company advertise at too. So make sure whichever you pick, and again, the core values that you don't need to do all of these. If you have the time and the money and effort to do it, that's fine. But if you do only 3 or 4 of these and you do them really well, that's just as good. Cool. So again, you want to make sure that you figure out your strengths and weaknesses too before you start into the. Oh, sorry. Anything like webcast? Oh, let's see here. Oops, sorry about that. Let me. Oh, cool. Um, I believe. Let me see here. So I would think that webinars are a bit similar to webcasts because you're just well, it's more of like an event that a lot of people that share similar interests can go to. But what I would say is that, let's see here. That's a great question. Um, I would say that if you're trying out a webcast, or I'm not sure if you could sign up for webcasting too, but if you're, or a webcast or a webinar, if you're going to one of these to present your brand or your information, I would say that you want to make sure you pick one that is not like extremely related, but probably you might assume that the customer you want to attract is there, right? I mentioned it yesterday, but a podcast that has a majority of male viewers might have more shaving ads on it, right? Just because the males are more likely to use, or well, everyone shaves, but it's just like some males, like a Dollar Shave Club, I believe they're called too. Some of them might advertise at a specific webcast or webinar for that too. So I would say that if you are doing a webcast or webinar for your content marketing, pick one that is not specifically your brand or anything, but might have customers that are related to your brand. But again, like Salman, as you said, there's content marketing and marketing yourself could be as simple as just like telling someone on the streets. That might not be a good strategy because they might think you're crazy or anything. But if you just tell someone on the street too about your brand and your company and what you do, it's essentially content marketing again. So anything counts in that regard. Nothing's off the table. These are just some good channel ideas. Cool. And again, what we mentioned earlier about the strategically choosing your channels is a good idea. And as you can see here, a few ideas as well is like if you're a very good presenter, you might want to do a presentation, as someone said, like with a webinar, a webcast, or a podcast. Or if you're preferred to write a lot, you can always do a blog or a website or a Twitter post or anything too. If you're funny, or if you're kind of on top of recent trends and stuff, you could definitely use Twitter and Facebook to advertise yourself too. So nothing is off the table in regards to that. Cool. And now here's another pretty crucial idea as well, is keeping your customer in mind. There's a few ideas that go over this too, but make sure that you understand that not everyone operates on the same idea. I'm okay with getting a lot of emails on my email because I clear it out a lot, so I don't mind signing up for email listing. But there might be some people who hate email listings, and that might be a deterrent for them. So what I would say is you don't need to pick only one of these. I would say do a kind of a combination of them, right? Like you can ask the customer if they want to sign up for a newsletter, or you could say follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And from there, you can kind of figure out what is getting you more attractions. If you see that you have more people on your newsletter than are following your Facebook page, you might want to stick with doing the newsletter more or anything as well. So these are all ideas to keep in mind when you're determining how you want to share your content. Here. And this is kind of this like something that occurs as well, but a very effective strategy is meeting the right people at the right place at the right time. But sometimes that doesn't always happen, but once it does, it helps out a ton. All right, Jim, welcome. Good morning. One more thing that I'll say too is that we talked about consistency and having a schedule, but that doesn't mean to be like stubborn all the time too, though. If you find that you're using a website that just isn't really getting your name out there and it's not really making it a hit, that doesn't mean you need to delete and restart. I would say be consistent with the website still, but you could also try to branch out and just always be receptive to change and what is going on in the world, because you never know when a new social media platform might arise. Instagram is getting a lot more famous as well, and it's just like everything's on the rise. So make sure that you're up to date with them in case you might fall off that kind of track of it too. Cool. So again, just another idea of getting ahead of your schedule. Just make sure that you're constantly planning ahead of time and that you're ready to change in case anything occurs during those times. Cool. So let me get one thing really quick. Awesome. Sorry, everyone. Put that here. Awesome. Cool. So we have an idea here. Let's see here. Great. And there's a little video here again. Let's see here. I need to do that discussion board thing because I think that might be more helpful for everyone too. So let me put that one together for us too. But the idea that we're going to approach here is that we want to understand what makes us share inside of our content and our branding. See here. And let's see here. And as an idea to think about as well, if you're ever thinking about how you might go about approaching your brand or sharing your information that you have, try to think about your favorite brand and try to think as well if you share what you learned from them too. So you might have learned something from various brands such as Nike or these larger brands as well. And you might want to think about how you learned, or excuse me, what you learned from those brands and if you shared what you learned with people as well. And I think having that exercise in your head really helps out with how you're going to brand yourself and share your own content. Because if it works on you, it might work on others as well. And, excuse me, the reason that we want to do this is because most people like the idea that they are knowledgeable and know what they're talking about. And it's always nice for them. It could be as simple as they would like to have something to talk about in a discussion too. So just having this idea that you have useful information that is specific to your brand or content that others might want to share could be very helpful in sharing your brand and getting your name out there too. Cool. And if you remember, we said earlier that we meet the right people at the right place at the right time. But another important thing is that the word of mouth or how others talk about you would probably be enhanced quite a bit if they are able to discuss this insider information that we are seeing here, or this idea that you're sharing with the customer information that they wouldn't know unless you provided it to them. And then if they could say, I learned that from this brand or from this company, it's more likely to get your name out there and increase the hits that you might get. Cool. Awesome. And again, just making your customers feel special. And some of these, again, they're not necessary if you are doing a certain types of brand or anything. Don't think that you have to check off every bullet point in these, but giving them even this simple idea that they could share what you're offering and, they might learn something from your company that you're not familiar with is helpful too. See here. Yep. And again, make your customers feel intelligent, and that will be able to pay off in the long run because the benefits of doing that are very, they might not be immediate, but it's pretty easy to see the benefits build up over time. Cool. And again, you might be thinking, okay, what's an idea of inside information? One I could think of off the top of my head is maybe at a gym or at a sports company. They might be giving you more information about workouts or like parts of your body. So, and then someone at the gym might say, oh, well, this part of the body is this because I learned it from them. And then that's pretty much how your information is shared. Cool. Awesome. So here's a few little checklists I would say that are important to share your content, and I would say that not each of these needs to be like it doesn't need to be 25% value, currency, story, and emotion. It could definitely be a combination of them. For instance, with emotion, if there's been a recent tragedy or some terrible events happened, a company might share emotional content. It might be much more driven by emotion. If new stuff is happening with cars or electronics, there might be more value in an informative piece. So all of these are important, but you don't need to do it like 25% for each of them. Your story could have just a ton of value and not too much of the other ones, but each of these is really important to have a part of your content in order for you to share it and increase the word of mouth that you have. Great. So here's one that I definitely think is important is your tone and setting the tone and delivering the goods. Because we also want to talk about consistency, right? If you're being consistent with your schedule, it's sometimes good to have a consistent brand and tone. You don't want to be very like off the walls in your brand a few days and then the next day try to be very serious and stuff like that because people won't take you as seriously as they'll see that you are not consistent with your tone. Cool. So again, let's see here. If you, excuse me, you might spend a lot of time figuring this one out too, which is fine as well. But definitely try to figure out what type of tone of voice. And again, tone of voice is essentially how you're presenting yourself and what type of personality you have to your customers. So if you see here, the Pop Tarts tone of voice is reverent, essentially meaning it's this kind of crazy Pop Tart that's going around. And the reason that might be is because it's associated with children. It's associated with breakfast in the morning. So there's a lot of aspects of it that just make it so that it doesn't need to be serious because a kid might not want to eat a food that's branded as a very serious food. Awesome. Let's see here. Cool. I think you got him. Awesome. Welcome. Good morning. And awesome. And then if we see here, the tone of voice of State Farm is caring. And the reason it's caring is because that's an insurance company, right? So we want to make sure that the insurance is there, that the customers know that whoever's taking care of them cares for them as well. So that's why the tone of voice is caring. And again, another exercise to add on with the other one as well is, let's see here. Yeah. And again, if you would like, you could share this using the mic, or if you just want to type in the chat, that's fine too. But if you'd like, try to think about some brands and what their customers are, and see what type of tone of voice they have as well. For instance, you might be thinking about Nike as well and the type of tone of voice they have too. Nike's like "Just Do It" slogan is very built for people that are just focused on getting the exercise done. So it's kind of like a no nonsense type of build. Whereas other companies, such as some clothing lines, might have a lot of excess added onto them just to show off that they're in similar line like that. Here. Cool. Here is a really important thing that I want to make sure everyone is familiar with. And you might have heard this before as well. But you are your brand. If you are advertising your company, it's you. So make sure that you're not talking about it like something else. You want to make sure that the customer can relate to your company, can relate to you and the product you're trying to sell. So make sure that you use the us, you, your, we. Like make it very personal and first person, and don't appear disengaged and cold as it says here. Because if you start talking about this company does this, you're going to seem like you don't really care too much about it. And you might see that too with a few. I know I get like a few like salesmen for AT&T and stuff, and it's always, oh, we will install the line. You will be really happy with it. We will install the fiber and stuff. So even these large scale companies are referring to themselves as we and us, just because it's kind of what their brand wants it to be. Cool. Here's a really important thing too, and this relates to what we talked to a bit about before as well, is that you should, if you don't have, or if you're not capable of it, you might hire someone to do the work for you. Is if someone's managing your social media and your writing, make sure that someone is constantly in control of it. You don't need one person doing all the work, but make sure you might have some reviews to see if it's appropriate and stuff like that as well. Because the key down here is that customers love consistency, and you don't want to have an article that is very like third person and detached, and then the next day have one that is first person and very personal. So make sure that you stay consistent with your writing, and it might be the way that you stay consistent is having one or two people responsible for all content output, or it might just be that you go through some reviews and stuff as well. Cool. So the long and short of it, essentially what this is talking about is that shortness has probably taken over. You might have noticed as well, especially during COVID, is that, at least with me as well, my attention span is kind of bad now. I think a majority of people's attention spans might not be the best anymore, especially with this online environment we're in. So essentially, you kind of want to, people just want, with their apps and Instagram and stuff, there's a lot of instant gratification that comes along with it too. But essentially what they are trying to say here is that you want to try to make stuff short. I would not be surprised that a majority of people don't want to read 2 pages about your clothing brand and what you're doing. They would much prefer just a sale message. Oop, excuse me for that. Sorry about that. They much prefer just a message that's pretty short and to the point and gets the idea across about what your company does. Saying that though, there is still people that once they get invested want to learn more about your company and will learn more about it too, because once someone is invested in your brand or your company, they will want information, right? And they might want the information that is something that they could share with others to make themselves feel good too. And then that ties into our previous lesson, right? That someone who can share information about your company is that word of mouth. So I would say that you don't need to disregard long copies or anything either. But for instance, you might focus on making short Twitter posts, and then in your About Us have your story, right? So have the story in the About Us. But people on Twitter probably don't want to read an About Us. They just want to see what your company's about. Let's see here. And again, essentially with that as well is what type of length are you going for? Instagram is only about photos, so you won't be writing too much on Instagram. LinkedIn is this kind of like professional Facebook type of deal. So it might just be more Facebooky where it says posts. Your website will probably have a lot of free information that's long. And if someone is coming to your website, they're going to expect to see that. So I would say you don't need to make your stuff on your website short. If someone gets annoyed by that, they'll probably let you know. But the majority of the time, people can scroll through a website and read what they want on it. Cool. So sticky strap lines. Essentially, a strapline is your tagline, and that will be your collection of words that accompanies the logo name. And again, it's just what is your essence in the few words that the strapline is. So tagline, strapline, whatever you would like to refer to it as. But again, we talked about Red Bull the other day, right? It gives you wings. The Nike is the Just Do It. So there's a bunch of straplines and taglines around that essentially embody what the company is about. And I think it's crucially important to have a really good tagline or anything like that as well, as that's what will make you stick out a bit more too. Cool. And I will discuss these discussion questions, I will tell us what to do in a few minutes with those. But just give me a few minutes with that. Cool. And again, why would you want to use taglines or anything as well? Essentially, it's to embody your brand and make sure that people understand what you're about in a few lines. So you want to make sure that people can just understand the message, the core values that we talked about yesterday as well, all from that tagline. Cool. And then when do you use it? I would say if you have a tagline, I would say you could use it all the time. It doesn't matter. It's just your company, it's your brand. You don't need to be constantly saying it or anything either. But I would say if you have a logo, you can just put it underneath it and stuff as well. So there's a lot of interesting ways to use your tagline. Yep. And as you can see here, don't make it too complicated. Just do it for Nike is perfectly fine. And I would say keep it simple to make sure that each individual knows what your brand is about. Cool. And here as well, you want to make sure that your core customer, which is what we discussed yesterday, remember we said what is our core value that attracts the core message for the core customer. You want to make your tagline something meaningful to your core customers. So, excuse me, L'Oreal is your beauty market. So because you're worth it is a great way to tell the customer that they're worth the product that they're paying for. And it makes them feel very good about themselves too, even if they're spending a lot of money on these. So that's a really nice way of telling the customer that they're worth it, that they should keep using your product because it's a very nice brand and that they should essentially treat themselves, right? Cool. And then again, these are just more examples of our taglines. Cool. So again, just be straightforward about your brand. Ask a bit about what some benefits are as well. Your tagline can be anything you want it to be, but essentially you want to make it attached to your core customer, right? And then a very important aspect of it too is that it should have a type of personality, which is kind of weird, right? We don't really think that the small sentences have a personality, but you could see here that, excuse me, even from Avis to Apple, there's a really big difference here. Apple is saying think different, so Apple is saying that their core customers are a bit, when I'm saying crazy, but they think a lot differently about stuff, and that they go. They approach situations in a different way. And so that's one idea that you can approach your core customers with too. Let's see here. Cool. And what I would say too is before you go live with your tagline, keep testing it. And I would say you should also test all of the items that you're working with too, such as your writings or anything too. Make sure you keep testing it to show off to your to make sure that it works, and test it with everyone. You could share it with your peers in the Zoom chat. You could share it with me. You could share it with associates and everything. So just make sure you test it before you go out and share it to the world.